had an urgent matter that I needed to deal with before I could come to Cabinet. Welcome. Welcome to everyone online, whether you're part of the council or people within Monmouthshire who are listening to Cabinet today. Do we have any apologies for her absence?
No apologies.
Not that I can see. Declarations of interest, Cabinet, if any, in which case I will bring us to the statutory consultation on proposal to change the age range of Duranda Primary School from 3 to 11 to 4 to 11 years. Councillor Rice, this is in your portfolio.
It is indeed. So this report seeks your approval to begin statutory consultation on proposal to change the age range of Duranda Primary School from 3 to 11 to 4 to 11 and to replace the maintained school nursery with a non-maintained early education setting operating on the school site. This proposal, it's rooted in our responsibility to give children in Monmouthshire the best possible start in life, while responding to how families now access early years education and childcare. Under the Childcare Act 2006, the council must ensure that all 3 and 4-year-olds can access funded early education, and that provision meets the needs of working parents. Since the introduction of the childcare offer for Wales, there's been a clear shift in parental demand towards settings that can offer early education alongside longer, more flexible childcare in a single setting. At Durand Primary School, the maintained nursery is operated with significant surplus places for several years now, and this has placed pressure on the school budget and has limited the sustainability of the current model. At the same time, an approved non-maintained provider is already operating on the school site. I must say they're a provider with a very good reputation, and they offer wraparound childcare, but it is constrained by shared space and part-time arrangements. This proposal should deliver early years provision in a way that better reflects family needs, offers greater flexibility and supports continuity of care for children while continuing to meet Curriculum for Wales requirements and inspection standards. A full options appraisal and an integrated impact assessment have been completed. These identify clear benefits for families and the school, minimal negative impacts and appropriate mitigation where required. There are no anticipated redundancies as existing nursery staff can be redeployed within the school. So the recommendation is to approve starting the statutory consultation process and the draft consultation document, ensuring that parents, staff, governors and the wider community have the opportunity to comment before any further decision is taken.
Thanks very much, Councillor Rudd. It appears very clear. Are there any observations or questions, Cabinet? In which case, I'm delighted to bring in Councillor John, because I believe you have a question, Councillor John.
I do. Good afternoon, Leader. Good afternoon, everyone. Well, firstly, I didn't think I would see a Labour administration bringing forward a proposal to privatise nursery provision, because I remember the Labour group going ballistic a few years ago when we did something similar somewhere else.
Is this your question, Councillor John? Because I don't recall this being a question.
Councillor Wright.
But I welcome.
So true, but not necessary.
I actually welcome this report, which I think should give working parents in the Caldecott area greater flexibility about how they access childcare. But doesn't this perfectly illustrate how the Welsh Government needs to modernise the offer from maintained nursery settings, which currently is so regimented that parents can only access 2.5 hours of free childcare per day? That discriminates against working families, and because no one can realistically do any meaningful work in less than 2.5 hours, particularly if you have to travel to your place of work. So really interested in your thoughts on that, please.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm glad that you are, supportive of this proposal in general. I think in terms of the childcare offer from the Welsh Government, I mean, we did have a full debate on this in full council last year. If you remember, I recognise, my colleagues recognise that some of the aspects of the childcare provision do need to change, particularly around provision for working families. As agreed, I wrote to the Minister to raise these concerns. I gave a copy of that letter to your colleague, Councillor Dimmock. And so I think you've had an adequate answer to that question already.
Good to see we're on the same page. Thank you very much.
As you knew we were, Councillor.
We have 2 recommendations from this report, as Councillor Wright laid out, to enter into a statutory consultation and to approve the attached draft consultation document, which is in Appendix 1, as you'll all know. Cabinet. Are we agreed? Yes. It's approved. We can move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the sale of 2 farm cottages at Small Holdings. And that will be you, Councillor Callard. Welcome.
Thank you, Leader. Bringing this report to Cabinet today to seek approval for the disposal of 2 vacant farm cottages located in Leachpool Holdings, Portsguet, identified as surplus to requirements following internal review with services that no longer have an identified need. The 2 cottages in question were subject to a decision by Cabinet on the 17th of January in 2024, which approved the repurposing of vacant agricultural cottages, including for such purposes as temporary accommodation for homelessness and social services, residential housing as supported accommodation. Due to the cottages' general condition and rural semi-isolated locations, the 2 cottages were subsequently deemed unsuitable for both housing, adult and children's service needs, and with no other alternative use identified, they are considered surplus to requirements. There are currently 6 vacant farm cottages held as accommodation options for farm tenants. These cottages provide accommodation options for council farm tenants if a change of circumstances arises or the expiry or termination of their tenancy or due to retirement. There is currently no known demand for the cottages for this use, and no demand is anticipated with other housing options generally preferred. The cottages are unfortunately in poor condition, having been vacant for some time, and would require extensive refurbishment works to meet current housing and energy performance standards. The recommendation before you is to agree that the 2 cottages are declared surplus to requirements and can be disposed of on the open market to realise a capital receipt and relieve the council of the costs associated with the vacant property.
Thanks, Councillor Callard. Are there any questions from Cabinet or observations indeed? Councillor Birch.
An observation, if I may. Can I just say how glad I am that we're able to create 2 new small holdings on the with regard to the other cottages. I think that's a great step forward. And of course, with regards to the general acquisitions of housing around the county, are making acquisitions elsewhere at the same time as disposing of these cottages, which are not suitable for homeless or temporary accommodations use.
It's a fair and good observation, Councillor Birch, and I welcome that joint working between yourself and Councillor Callard on this matter, because you're speaking both to our food strategy and to our assets management strategy, and ensuring that we do start to develop a coherent portfolio of small holdings based around regenerative and organic farming. So well done, both of you. That is good. Is there observations from anyone else? In which case, I will bring in Councillor Taylor. Welcome. It's really good to see your face. You have 2 questions with regards to this particular issue. They're quite aligned, so I suggest we take them together.
Thank you, Leader, and it's good to hear Councillor Birch talk about some small holdings that have been created, and my question was really around the compatibility of divesting of what are essentially obviously agricultural dwellings and you know, potentially have the opportunity to be turned into small holdings. So my question is, you'll recall the work that council has been involved in. It's good to hear that's progressed. And one of the key asks was to use potential county farm estate to increase access to land for small producers, growers, stroke community use. And, you know, I know that the community and corporate plan talks about sustainable local agriculture and farming practices, with public services and residents consuming more local and seasonal produce. And in terms of the number of, I won't go through them all, I'm sure you know them better than I, Leader, but cabinet members, but you know, looking at the kind of objectives, if you like, and actions that the council would take. Essentially, I wondered, is this really divesting of county farm holdings, providing potential accommodation with or adjacent to agricultural land? I noticed that one of the cottages certainly looks to have land adjoining it, which is would be potentially part of the sale if agreed. I just wondered if that was compatible, really. And my second question was, obviously, as you mentioned, the council did take, or the cabinet took a decision in January of last year to approve the refurbishment of these vacant agricultural cottages for the purposes you just mentioned. And I just wondered why that, has any refurbishment taken place, and why have they been left vacant for a year, really? Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Those are two questions which I think really give you an opportunity, Councillor Callard, to explain and elucidate our policy in action.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Councillor Taylor. These cottages, I believe our course of action is entirely consistent with our objectives being set out in the community and corporate plan. With the disposal of these cottages, there won't be any land, apart from kind of the curtilage garden of the cottage being sold along with the properties. And when we look across our estate, really, we're trying to make sure that all of our assets work as best they can for the council in meeting its objectives. I think, as Councillor Birch alluded to earlier, we've made investments in property where they're required to support our services, and we're happy to dispose of property where they don't support those objectives. We have agricultural cottages which are being repurposed and have potential for that kind of small-scale horticulture which you talk about, and it's something that I'm really passionate about. I know the leader is as well, in terms of increasing those opportunities for kind of market gardening, small businesses. There's a load of great success stories with those sorts of businesses around the county, and it's an industry that we're really keen to grow, and actually to integrate it with other areas of the council, such as food purchasing. But these two cottages, unfortunately, they fall outside of the requirements for that sort of use, and we, as we've spoken about, explored other uses, whether they can be used to support our other services, but it was found that due to their location, they're really not suitable for that. So, as has always been our objective, let's not hold on to property which, these houses will make lovely homes, for individuals or families, I'm sure. Let's not hold on to them. Let's get our assets working for us, as we've shown with the acquisition over the past couple of years. There are a number of houses which are supporting our young people in care specifically. On your second question about the length of time it's taken, the initial report was regarding a number of different cottages. It wasn't just this two, and work has been ongoing. A number of surveys were carried out on these properties to try and better understand, what work was required, whether that work was worth it, and subsequent to that work being done, I'm bringing this report today to take the decision that actually the best course of action with these properties is to divest.
Thanks, Councillor Callard. We have just one recommendation, as was made clear in the presentation. It's whether we agree or not to the two cottages are declared surplus and then sold on the open market. Do I have approval, Cabinet? Agreed, Nick. That moves us on to item 5, section 106 Church Road and Crick Road allocation of section 106 off-site recreation funding, and that I believe is you, Councillor Griffiths.
Councillor Birch will lead off on the multiple user route, and I'll introduce some comments on the approach to section 106 funding.
That makes perfect sense.
Thank you, Leader. The report seeks approval for the allocation of section 106 off-site recreation funding arising from the Church Road and Crick Road developments in Caldecott and Portskewitt. Both those agreements set out clear expectations on how those contributions must be used. And today's recommendations ensure that we comply with those while delivering strong benefits for the communities of Caldicot and Portskewett. So the proposal is to allocate two amounts to the Caldicot Greenway and multi-user route. Funding from Church Road of just over £144,000. From the Crick Road development, £400,000 was secured in total, and we're proposing to allocate £167,000 from that sum at this stage, subject to the funds being received. So the Caldicot Greenway and multi-user route is a strategically important active travel corridor, linking the former munitions railway route with Caldicot Castle, the country park, and the wider network of paths across Sevenside. And it connects communities in Caldicot, Portskewett, Caerwent, Sudbrook, and Crick, and opens up safe, traffic-free routes to employment, education, and of course, as a use as a leisure route, linking to some of our most valued natural and heritage destinations, including the Wales Coast Path and the Gwent Levels. And the Greenway directly aligns with our ambition for 20-minute neighbourhoods, for making all of our towns able to be accessed on foot, on two wheels, and for people with less mobility, improving health and well-being and accessibility. And we've undertaken extensive engagement to test the public support for the scheme. More than 460 residents and businesses were reached through workshops, letters, emails, and drop-in sessions. And the response was clear. Around 2/3 of respondents supported the project, with only a small minority expressing opposition. And people consistently highlighted the importance of a well-surfaced, accessible route with seating, signage, and opportunities for those with reduced mobility to use the Greenway confidently and safely. And that level of support, I think, gives us a strong mandate to proceed. So the total cost of delivering the scheme is £650,000. We've already secured £190,000 of active travel funding and £150,000 from the Shared Prosperity Fund. And that leaves a £310,000 shortfall, and the proposed Section 106 allocations will enable us to close that gap fully and deliver the project without delay. Allocating this funding now allows us to maximise the external grants already in place, avoiding escalating costs, and ensure the planning and SAB consents remain valid without the need for resubmission. So just to close, the Equality and Future Generations assessment confirms that this scheme brings strong benefits for our communities. It improves inclusion by creating a safe, accessible route, and it supports those healthier lifestyles. So in conclusion, I would ask Cabinet to approve the allocation of the Section 106. If I can pass to Councillor Griffiths to elucidate on how any allocations may be handled in the future.
In my role as Cabinet member for planning, I have some oversight on the procedures for our use of Section 106 funds. I remind Cabinet that these funds derive from agreements that are made at the time of granting a planning consent to an applicant who wishes to develop land. And the nature of that agreement is that funds are made available for directly related community purposes, which are specified in that agreement. The responsibility for how those funds are dispersed within the constraints of that agreement lies clearly with Cabinet, which is why we've got that report today. But I've been very keen that the recommendations that come to Cabinet are influenced by a full engagement with ward members in the areas affected by the developments that have taken place. And it's in that context that Councillor Birch's recommendation that we allocate money for the multi-user route, that recommendation is not wholly a personal one. I have witnessed the extent of the discussions that have taken place with members in Caldicot and Portskewett and wider in Sevenside on the merit of allocating money to this multi-user route. And there is a consensus that this money would be well allocated in that way. And it's that sort of building of consensus, which is the way in which I want to take that forward. And I think that's will inform the answer to any questions I might have on any residual amounts from that fund.
Thanks, Councillor Griffiths. I think one of the challenges of understanding allocations is the time lapse between the agreements made before the building of an infrastructure or development, which in some cases can be years and years and years, and then after the building going forward with oftentimes a complete different set of people and stakeholders around a decision that has already been made. And so I think what you're saying is a really important way of addressing that challenge that makes sense to residents within those developments and across the county. And do we have any observations or questions from Cabinet? We do have a question from Councillor John. Please come in, Councillor John.
Thank you, Leader. Given that the village of Portskewett continues to bear the brunt of additional housing developments, not just from Crick Road, but also the new projected developments in the replacement local development plan, can you explain how residents in Portskewett are going to benefit from these Section 106 funds? Because it still feels like funding is being skewed towards Caldecott.
Thank you.
If I could answer that. I'd be eager to.
It's good to see enthusiasm, Cabinet members.
Because I think it directly relates to what I was trying to say earlier, Councillor John, that there might have been a time, there might have been in other local authorities where these funds are distributed, if you like, from the top down. And I am very eager that the discussion on how these funds, in the context of the agreement, takes place within discussions amongst local members. In terms of these funds, they emanate from two sources: the Church Road development, like to the north of Caldecott, and the Crick Road development in the ward of Portskewett, adjacent to Caldecott. Discussions have taken place, continue to take place with all the relevant members. I would argue that the multi-user route is of equal value to residents of Portskewett as it is to residents of Caldecott. It links the two settlements. It allows residents of Portskewett to have an attractive route to the castle and the amenities of the town centre. It allows the residents of Caldecott to have access to the attractive village of Portskewett, its amenities, and to the Greenway, opening up the levels for them as well. So it's a massively attractive amenity to both communities. In terms of looking forward, there is a residual amount, once this is allocated, if Cabinet agrees, of 233,000 from these two developments. The discussions with members will continue on that allocation. The member for Portskewett has made a very strong case that some part of that money is allocated to the recreation centre in Portskewett. Many of us have visited that centre, listened to the ward member, and are absolutely persuaded that an allocation should be made to that facility. Work is ongoing in order to finish the design and to cost the improvements that need to be made there. Once that data is available, it will be shared with local members, and a informed, I have no doubt, fair decision will be reached on the distribution of that money to the Portskewitt Recreation Centre and other amenities in the local area.
Thank you. That's really helpful.
Councillor Griffiths is secretary.
Surely not. Anyone else who has a comment? For this report, we have 9 recommendations, which I'm not going to read out. They have all been covered by Councillor Griffiths and Councillor Birch, and they refer to the purpose of the report, which is how to disperse the capital sums from Section 106 agreements received from the developments that were specified in the 2024-25 budget, so this year's budget. With that, are we in agreement?
Yes.
No, sorry, last year's. Last year's budget. Thank you. Thank you for that puzzled look. I was taking us back in time. I will now bring us to the present and ask you to tell me if you agree.
Yes. I've only got 2 recommendations. You said 9. Am I looking at something right paper?
We're not telling you about the other stuff.
Recommendation, it's 2 and there's an overarching one, but they all refer to it.
Okay.
I can show you.
Don't worry.
I was reminded the other day that there are several cultures in the world who do not think about time in the way we do. Just a thought, Cabinet. And I'll bring you from that thought onto item 6, which is the draft revenue and capital budget proposals for 2026-2027. And I have got the right year here. Over to you, Councillor Callard.
Thank you, Leader. I'm proud today to present our draft revenue and capital budget proposals for 2026-2027. Budgets are statements of values. They're about the kind of council we choose to be and the kind of county that we want to live in. I'm pleased to say that for the first time in many years, this council is not proposing any cuts to frontline services. After years of relentless pressure, years marked by austerity, by a pandemic, by persistent inflation, this feels like a turning point. Waste collections remain unchanged. Leisure centres, libraries, recycling centres and community hubs are going to continue to serve our communities as they currently do. It's not accidental. It's the result of disciplined financial management, difficult decisions taken earlier in this administration, and a relentless focus on protecting what matters most. But this budget does more than hold the line. It invests. It invests in the services our residents rely on. It invests in the places that we all share, and it invests in the infrastructure that underpins our economy and our daily lives. Across our key frontline services, funding is increasing. We're proposing to increase social care and health funding by 5.6%, education by 4.7%, leisure, countryside and cultural services by 4.5%, and infrastructure by 4.4%. Let me focus for a moment on infrastructure and highways, because this is where residents often feel the impact of underinvestment most directly. The last administration made the decision to focus capital investment on the renewal of our school estate. I make no judgment of that, it was overdue, but that decision had the consequence of taking funding away from our highways. We're proposing £5.5 million of capital investment across our infrastructure network with a particular focus on highway structures. That includes a major investment in carriageways, footpaths, bridges, retaining walls and public rights of way, addressing the highest risk areas and the most urgent backlogs. It includes the refurbishment of the Chain Bridge, a vital and historic link in our transport network, ensuring it remains safe and resilient for the future. It includes further funding for road resurfacing, bridge maintenance and rights of way improvements, helping people travel safely, whether by car, by foot or by bike. This is practical investment I hope residents will see and feel. Alongside capital investment, we're also strengthening day-to-day services that look after our highways and neighbourhoods. We're investing in an additional gully cleaning team and street sweeping team. improving our resilience and reducing surface water risks. These are the kinds of preventative measures that save money in the long term and prevent disruption in the short term. But this budget is not just about roads and bridges. It continues our commitment to education, with a further £1 million investment in school budgets for the second consecutive year. This represents an additional £96 per pupil, or about £20,000 for a standard primary school, on top of fully funding pay and pension pressures. It also invests in Welsh language education, and we will continue the Inspire programme to support those young people not in education, employment or training. It strengthens social care, with an additional £1 million investment supporting both adults and children and maintaining our focus on prevention and early intervention. It protects the most vulnerable, with more support for additional learning needs, and it boosts vital community services such as citizens' advice and our libraries. All of this has been achieved in a context that remains extremely challenging. Demand continues to rise, costs remain high, and despite a welcome improvement in Welsh Government funding, difficult choices have still been required. That's why this budget balances investment with responsibility. It includes efficiencies where we can deliver them safely. It increases income in a measured and transparent way, and it avoids the unsustainable use of reserves to fund day-to-day services. The proposed council tax increase of 5.95% is not taken lightly, but it is part of a balanced approach that allows us to protect essential local services, invest in our infrastructure, and maintain the financial stability of the council. Colleagues, this budget reflects a council that has moved from survival to stability, and now from stability to investment. It shows that even in tough times, it's possible to protect frontline services, invest in the foundations of our county, and plan responsibly for the future. This is now a draft budget, and it will be subject to scrutiny, challenge, and public consultation over the coming weeks. I look forward to engaging with our residents, service users, young people, and other councillors to listen to their views on what our priorities should be. But today, I can say with confidence that these proposals are fair, responsible, and ambitious, and if adopted, they put Monmouthshire on a stronger footing for the years ahead. I commend this draft budget to Cabinet. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cabbard. I think your point that we've moved from surviving to stability to investment is really the watchword of this administration. It has always been our determination that we make decisions based on our values of tackling inequality and poverty, of addressing the climate change and nature crises, collaborating with others, but ensuring we do so with responsibility and accountability, that we can show value for money to our residents. And you working with other cabinet members have been able to deliver a budget that demonstrates that. Cabinet, do you have any observations or questions? Councillor Sandals.
Thank you, and thank you, Councillor Cabbard, for that excellent report. You'd expect me to ask this question as Cabinet Member with responsibility for engagement. You did mention at the end of your presentation there about public consultation. Could you expand a little on that, please, and tell us how you are planning to engage for this budget consultation?
Of course, thanks, Councillor Sandals. We know consultation is really important in terms of actually getting feedback on what we are proposing. We go through it with many different proposals that the council put forward, but it always seems to me that the kind of budget is like a point in time in the year where it gives us a real chance to reflect, actually, and I think that makes that consultation process doubly important. We've got a number of sessions planned in the calendar. The consultation itself opens tomorrow and will run until the 18th of February. We will be meeting with residents. We've got a number of drop-in sessions around the county. We've also got a number of online sessions people can join if they're not able to get to any of the drop-ins. We'll be putting information around within our council offices around the county and leisure centres, so people can take a read. We'll also be engaging with various groups who use different services. So we'll be meeting with town and community councils, we'll be meeting with head teachers, with governors from our schools, and with some of the young people across our youth service as well. So it's a process I'm really looking forward to. As you can imagine, my calendar is getting really full for the next 4 weeks, and I'm really excited about it, to get out there and talk to people about what we're proposing, why we're proposing it, and to receive feedback on it, to see what people think about it.
Thanks, Councillor Callard. It's a bit of a plug for you, Councillor Sandals, because Let's Talk Monmouthshire is developing in a progressive way, and we met earlier this month with members of Let's Talk Monmouthshire Forum to talk about budgets in general terms rather than the budget. And some of the suggestions from that forum have fed into both the engagement process, but also the budget, in the terms of how you thought about the presentation, but also could make a few tweaks. And I think that's what we have been trying to do each year, and improve how we do it, in that the way that we engage, so people feel there is a response. And we are doing the budget this year through our Let's Talk Monmouthshire app and approach, which Councillor Sandals will be monitoring. So watch out, Councillor Callard. Is there any other councillor who would like to come in, cabinet member? Okay, we have questions from both Councillor John and Councillor Taylor, and it's time for you to come first, Councillor Taylor, to ask your questions.
Thank you very much, Leader. So just 2 questions. Do you want me to ask them together, Leader?
I think since they're very different, please ask them separately.
Okay, thank you. So thank you for your presentation, Councillor Callard. That's very interesting, and certainly I noticed that the paper is set out slightly differently this year, which is possibly easier to read. I don't know, be interested in what the views are. Obviously, we note that the proposed increase that you've just outlined, council tax, is 5.95%. I'm not a mathematician, and so, but it seems to me that probably is about a third increase in council tax since 2022, roughly. What impact do you think that would be having on the sort of just the average household, councillor? I'd just be interested to hear your thoughts on that. Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Taylor. Just on that first point about the report being slightly different, we've made a real effort this year to try and condense the information without losing any of the content, to make it more accessible for people to read. So I'm hoping that we're successful in that. And also, if people do want to get into the detail, that should be possible by going through links in the documents. On the proposed council tax increase, and I guess the cumulative increase in the last 4 years, I think when you add the percentages together, like that, you do end up with some numbers that sound significant. I suppose I would put that in the context of, over that period of time, we have seen some reasonably high inflation. I think inflation, depending on how you measure it, has been between 16 and 20% over that period of time. But we know that council tax has been going up in the past higher than the rate of inflation. When you compare us to other authorities across Wales, we're broadly in the same ballpark, kind of high 20s, low 30s seems to be, especially among rural authorities, ones with comparative service challenges to us, comparative demographics. So I don't think we're an outlier in that respect. As we know, as we've seen as councillors over the past few years, especially, we've seen real challenges, particularly within health and social care, with increasing demand and increasing complexity of demand. And what we've seen last year, the year before, is that as well as having to have a council tax increase that's higher than the one that's proposed this year, we have also had to make changes to our services. Some of those changes, which, as you know, we would rather have not have made. That's why this budget feels different, because this year we're not reducing any frontline services at all, and in fact we're improving frontline services. Because what I've heard from residents, what I've heard from across the council chamber, is actually a real appetite for council services themselves to improve. So when building this budget, that's what we've looked to prioritise. I know that there are going to be some households who could really do without a higher bill. I think we've recognised that, but the way that we balance that is twofold. Firstly, there is support for those with the council tax reduction scheme who may be on low incomes, and secondly, the balance that I take is that actually our public services, like the alternative to increasing council tax by this much, is reducing reducing the services that the council offers. 5.95% increase in council tax equates to just over £5 million worth of additional funding. Now, the alternative to not increasing council tax by 5.95% is actually looking within our services to save that £5 million. Now, I would say that our residents will benefit more from better public services. Better public services support the most vulnerable. They support our people receiving social care. They support the pupils within our schools. They support people who want to use the leisure centres. They support people who just walk on their pavements and use the roads. These are all services that we rely on, and they are not services that any one of us can go and purchase ourselves. If I want my roads to be maintained better, I can't go and maintain the road myself. We socialise these costs that we can't bear as individuals. And so when we set the budget as a council, we make that balance in terms of what are the services that we want to see, and how do we think those services should be funded for. And I hope that when residents look at this budget, and hopefully engage in the consultation, I don't expect any to come forward and say, I'm really excited to be paying more council tax. I'm not naive like that. But what I do hope they can say is, look, I can see what I'm getting for my additional council tax. I can see that there is going to be investment into the public services, that there'll be more money in my children's school, that an elderly relative I might have who's receiving social care will their social care will continue to the same level at which they become accustomed to. So that's I suppose that's the message that I'm going to give with this budget.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Khaled. And my second question really relates to reserves. You know that we frequently ask about the reserve strategy, so I wondered if you could possibly outline where you are with that. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Taylor. Our reserve strategy is covered in the covering report of the document. It's also covered in our medium-term financial plan. This budget is not using any of our general reserve to fund any day-to-day services. As you know, we wound out of that position a couple of years ago because our reserves, they are towards the minimum recommended level. And it's our intention, where possible, to rebuild those reserves over time. It's not something that we intend to do quickly, because the priority really is supporting services. But you'll know we put in a £1 million contingency budget in financial year 2025-2026. That contingency budget is going to continue for 2026-2027. And where there are underspends within that budget, one of the options we have for that is to replenish our reserves. So we are not going to let our reserve position deteriorate any further, and we will rebuild it as it's prudent to do so.
Thank you, Councillor Callard.
Thank you. Before I bring in Councillor John with his questions, I just thought I'd remind you, Councillor Ben, that we were tasked by Councillor Thomas Davis, if you recall, in the last council in November, I believe, to go out and get the best deal possible, the best settlement possible for Monmouthshire. And we achieved it. We lobbied very, very hard to get the settlement we did of 4.4%, which raised Monmouthshire from the bottom. And that is due to very active efforts that we made on behalf of our own council, but also with WLGA. And that was reflected, I think, in that two years running, we have been able to invest in education, for example. And as you say, to move last year from stability into investment, and I would hope next year we maintain that investment, that growth mindset, that growth budget that we have here, because of the result of governments in UK and in Cardiff who are aligned in supporting local authorities and allowing us to increase our budget settlement in the way it has. And that has been really important for us, because if you recall, back in April 2024, we were looking at 0% increase. And that has changed, and it has helped us move to this kind of budget. So over to you, Councillor John.
Thank you, Leader. And just firstly to say I won't be apologising for the previous administration investing in our school estate and renewing it. And I think it's a disappointment that we haven't seen any plans from this administration to continue that renewal. You have a shortfall in the budget of £1 million that will require further cuts to services or tax rises, but you're not being straight with the public about what that will look like. You've said you're hopeful of additional government funding, but have no guarantee of that. Don't you think it's misleading to consult on a budget that's incomplete?
Thank you for the question, Councillor John. Just on the first point, it's not a criticism to say that you invested in the school estate. I think it was, the right thing to do. Certainly, when I went back to King Henry as part of the planning visit for the new school, it hadn't changed much in the 20 years since I'd been there. So I think it was well overdue. My point around that was mainly to say that, with limited capital investment budget, we make decisions about where we place it. I make no judgment on it. On the question about the budget, the draft budget not netting to zero, going out with a gap. Your premise that we will either need to cut services or increase tax in order to bridge that gap. That's a false premise, I would say. And just to give some context as to the gap, we're going out with a gap of about £970,000. Now that's a huge amount of money to me and you, but actually in the context of the council's budget, it represents less than 0.5% of the council's budget. The council gets income from various sources. Yeah, it gets just under 40% of its income from council tax. It gets about 60% of its income from Welsh Government, but we also have a number of other funding streams, grant funding, and we know that as we run from now into March, that it's highly likely that that more funding will become available to the council through various means, not just through changes to the settlement from Welsh Government, and we also know that at month 6, and I know we'll be bringing our month 9 financial update scrutiny shortly, but at month 6, our £1 million contingency budget remained unspent, and indeed we were looking to post a surplus. So I can give you my word, Councillor John, that assuming no, and touch wood, no catastrophic disasters in Monmouthshire within the next 6 weeks, that we will bridge the budget gap without recourse to increase council tax and without cutting any further services.
Right, thank you. Well, obviously, let's hope there are no adverse events. My next question is similar to Councillor Taylor's. Your proposed council tax increase of 5.95%. If that goes ahead, Councillor Taylor's right, council tax will have increased by a third in just 4 years. That is going to be hurting some of the most vulnerable families in Monmouthshire. So what assessment have you made of the impact that this will have on the most vulnerable in our county?
I hate to respond to a question with a question, Councillor John, but I wondered if you could define how you're using the word vulnerable in this context.
I think there's quite a wide definition of the word vulnerable, but my question is about vulnerable groups in the county.
Okay. For further information about the impact that the budget is having, you can look at the impact assessment that's contained within the budget papers. The details are there. But similar to my answer,
I know, but I want you to tell me about it.
Similar to my answer to Councillor Taylor, when we invest in public services, we actually support the most vulnerable within our society. We support those children with ALN. We support those people requiring social care. And actually those people on lower incomes who may struggle to pay their bills, there are support systems in place for them to help them with their council tax. My view on council tax is that while it's not as progressive as we might like, it is a progressive tax. And actually, in investing in our services, we are supporting those who are the most vulnerable within our county. And just to, I don't want to completely repeat my answer that I gave to Councillor Taylor, but the alternative to not increasing council tax by 5.95%, say we increase, say for example, we didn't increase council tax at all, we would need to find over £5 million worth of savings within our services. Now, my question to you is, how does that serve the most vulnerable within our society when you're cutting education funding, cutting social care funding, and cutting other areas of council services, potentially cutting waste collections? I honestly believe that the way we have approached this is prudent, and it does so in an ethical way which supports our goal of reducing inequality within Monmouthshire.
Thank you for your response. I'm not here to answer your questions, but I'm sure we can have a further debate about this tomorrow.
I'm sure we will. And point of information, Councillor John, the impact assessment is a statutory obligation. We go on further in many ways in that we look at a whole range of households, from individual households by age, families, two-person households, income levels, and we assess the risk of the budget not after the budget has been developed, but in tandem with the development of the budget, so that adjustments are made within the budget that Councillor Callott presented, but also mitigations can be put in place. And around that, as Councillor Sandals has informed us on many occasions, we have become far better with our partners, including Citizens Rights Bureau, to really ensure that the information of how to get council tax reductions or council tax elimination, no, I think that's the wrong word, is targeted at the right people, and they are encouraged and supported to apply for those exemptions and reductions. I got the right word there. I knew you'd want to come in, Councillor Sandals, so I came in for you.
Thank you.
That brings us to the recommendations, which Councillor Callard has already referred to. There are 6. Are we agreed?
Yeah.
That's approved, and I think we're all really pleased that we are now going out to consultation to get the views from our residents, and that we hope this year we build on the number of residents we reached last year, because you'll recall, councillors, we have increased our engagement and the numbers we engaged year on year since taking over the administration, and we must keep on doing that and ensure we allow the views of our residents to be fed into this budget process. Thank you very much, all of you. Go forth and have a good evening. Thank you, everyone online. Bye-bye.
Thank you,
Councillor Callard and Councillor Maybe, could you stay on?
No, she's gone.
She's gone. Councillor John.
Do you want me to stay on for this, Leader?
No.